All right, and we're back here with Don Brzezinski talking about the cross life, and where I think we left off again. We're talking about in James, where we're talking about, the faith without works is useless or dead, and kind of a very confusing topic, especially in light of what we're talking about in the cross life, where we're talking about participating and not being in a performance-based anything really, and so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Don to kind of bring us up to speed where we are, because we were talking about, all I remember is you're talking about some kind of gymnastics and things like that, and that sounded like a lot of work to me.
Yeah, working out does sound like a lot of work, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Well, there's the two sides of what James was talking about is one side is faith and the other side is work. And if you overemphasize one to the exclusion of the other, you have a mess. And so we've referred to the fact that we need an attitude of faith, but then there's also the discipline activities of faith. And we referenced the fact that Paul, writing to Timothy, used the word discipline yourself for the purpose of godliness. And we discover that the English word that is derived from that Greek word, we get the word gymnasium or gymnastics. And so we understand in a physical realm that discipline does involve regular exercise, like an athlete preparing himself for the Olympics, or, your sports show, all of the teams that prepare for the big game.
Right.
There's a lot of preparation that's involved, and that is disciplined activity. And without that, you're not gonna play real well.
No.
So there is the disciplined activity of faith. Now, somebody might say or ask, are these deliberate choices our performance or our work?
Right.
And I would say no. These disciplined activities of faith are not to be construed as works of performance by which somehow we activate or energize our Christian ability to live. And nor do we earn or merit God's pleasure or benefits by our obedience, by our participation in these disciplines. Rather, these discipline activities are chosen activities wherein we place ourselves kind of what I would call in the stream or the flow of God's grace.
Okay, now I'm going to bring up where it's going to confuse me a little. So maybe I'm sure you can straighten me out. I know you can. You can't see it here on radio, but he's smiling at me because he knows he's got an answer.
Oh,
so
I have no idea what you're going to ask.
I know, but you still know you have an answer. So that's the funny part for me is, the part in there where he's saying, "Well done, good and faithful servant." So doesn't it kind of seem like he'd be well pleased by are participating in this? Yes or no?
Well, he designed us to experience relationship with himself.
Okay.
We have a choice in that. There has to be a choice or it could never be a relationship. Obviously, God is pleased when we participate with him because it allows us to glorify or worship him in our response in doing so.
Right.
So it's not that things aren't pleasing to the Lord, but it's not like God needs us to please him. It's not like God is needy.
Right.
So I think that helps to answer your question.
Yeah, a little bit. And then, we always talk about that you don't have free will, you have free choice. Free will would be able to, you make a tree right now just because you think of it. That would be you willing something. And the choice is you have the choice to participate with the Lord or not.
We have the choice to participate with the one who has free will.
Right. Correct. Yeah.
God himself.
Yeah. So, but in that's really the only thing we can do is our choice. Is it not?
Right.
There's not like really any other work other than the choice.
Exactly. And it's not a work to choose. See, that's what we just mentioned a moment ago. So don't slip up with that.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. The language, it gets real slippery sometimes.
We don't earn or merit by choosing properly.
Right.
Because God is the initiator. God is the one who's prompting. God is the one who's attempting to take the lead. We simply choose to align ourselves or agree with him or to say the same thing that he says about us and
Right.
participate in his glorious
And
activity.
there's no pride in that choice because he's the
No.
one that gave us the choice in the first place.
Well, he didn't get he gave us the opportunity to choose.
Right.
He didn't do it for us.
Right.
That's our faith opportunity. Faith is the receptivity.
Right.
So some people think that God does the faithing for us, and I would disagree with that.
Okay.
Now, grace is God's, I don't really like to refer to it as God's part, my part, but faith is our opportunity
Okay.
to participate with God's grace activity.
Right. And I like that.
So when we're talking about choosing activities that kind of align or place ourselves in the stream or the flow of God's grace, it's in order to allow for the activity of His grace to express His all-glorious character in the midst of our activity. Now think about that. That's amazing, because half the times the situations that we find ourselves in, we're not that excited about. There's a lot of circumstances and places in life that we'd rather not be, that are difficult, that are challenging, that are a trial or a temptation. But as we recognize His presence in any given moment of our day and choose to be disciplined in our faith response by allowing for His gymnastic response through us, we allow for the character expression of godliness to be manifest through us.
Nice.
So that's pretty neat.
Now, yeah. So, okay, can you give us some biblical examples to help kind of clarify that?
Yes, there's a number of examples that illustrate that, so I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 19. Paul admonishes Timothy kind of in a negative, abstain from wickedness. You see, God gives the parameters of how we're to live, and He is the means of us doing so. For example, Peter warns us to abstain from fleshly lusts in 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 11. Paul warns believers to refrain from immorality in 1 Thessalonians 4 chapter 3. In fact, he told the Thessalonians in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 22 to refrain from every form of evil. Now, why would he admonish us? Because any form of evil is whose character?
Right. Satan's.
And yeah. So discipline yourself to participate with God, because that's consistent with who you are. We are responsible to choose, as Paul admonished in Romans 12:2, not to be conformed to this world. We feel the pressure of conformity every day, don't we?
Yes.
Oh yeah. In the schools, it's the peer pressure. As we become adults and get into different groups and organizations, there's always the pressure to conform, isn't there?
Yes, it sure is. Yeah.
Another example would be to deny ungodliness and worldly desires. Titus chapter 2 and verse 12. Christians are to, Paul says, put no confidence in the flesh. Philippians 3:3. Or as he said to the Romans in chapter 13 and verse 14, make no provision for the flesh. In other words,
right.
If you've got your little fleshly stash at the house,
okay,
whatever that would be. I imagine the moment I said that, everybody had a different idea of what their stash was.
Yeah, and they were like, oh no.
You don't make a provision for the flesh. Why? Because you know where to go get that provision, don't you?
Yep.
So you're going to be disciplined to put those fleshly things away,
right.
to avoid turning your freedom into an opportunity for the flesh. That's what Paul admonished the Galatians in chapter 5.
Now, when you're
verse
talking about
13.
that and, not feeding that flesh and, putting it aside, and it kind of says when you're reborn, your old self is dead. It's kind of...
That's a spiritual condition.
A spiritual condition.
Yeah,
and we kind of talked about that a little bit.
Don't confuse spiritual condition with flesh patterning.
Right.
A lot of Christians don't make a distinction between the spirit and the soul. And as a result, there is so much confusion as to how to participate with Christ and experience the Christian life as God intended. So spiritual condition has to do with our human spirit being joined to the Lord, our nature, our spiritual condition, our identity, whereas the soul, the mind, the will, and emotions has to do with the patterning that is recorded there. And for all of us, because we were born into this world with the wrong condition to start with, the patterning is sinful or fleshly. That's where Christ is in the process of renewing our minds. As he initiates his character expression and we choose to participate, now we have new programming, if you will.
Right.
So we have some new, better software.
But that's also where a lot of people beat themselves up, because they're still they're buying that lie of you are what you do, when that's really not the case. Once you are completely different. Now your actions may not line up with spirit, but that doesn't mean that's who you are.
Right.
That just means you just participated in a fleshly act, or you went to patterning.
Exactly. Because of the performance-based teaching and preaching, so few Christians really understand their identity. And so the way it's been communicated to them is that behavior determines identity, which is wrong. Identity is the basis of our behavior. So if we understand our identity, learn how to participate with Christ, then we can be disciplined in our choices to allow our choices to manifest a faith dependence upon the Lord and allow for the graceful expression of his character through us, which then our character is, our behavior is the character expression of Jesus.
Right. And that was also like in some of our earliest discussions, we talked about identity. So we encourage you, while we go to break, to go to cross-life.org, and you can start queuing some of those up so you can go back and listen in on that. And it's really good stuff. I encourage you to go there. We'll be right back.
Hey, this is Jason with the Sideline, along with Mike Kelly, new owner-operator in your Mall Chick-fil-A location. We have a mission for you. Eat more chicken! It's a simple 6-day-a-week mission.
And if you choose to accept this mission, go to the Indian River Mall Chick-fil-A right now. Remember, they're closed on Sunday.
Disclaimer, no chickens were hurt during the making of this commercial. This message will self-destruct. Now! This is Jason with the Sideline. Listen, you need a bike? You need your bike repaired? Check out Allen's Bicycle Center.
Allen's Bicycle Center, located in old downtown Vero at 2020 Commerce Avenue. They are the largest and oldest established bike shop in the county. 6,000 square feet of bikes and accessories, and 25 years they've been in this town.
Your bike won't go? They'll fix it. They'll make it go. You want a new one? You can buy one there. They got everything you need to put on that bike, make it work. They even got spin class shoes. Check them out. Tell them the Sideline sent you.
All right, and we're back, and we're here with Don Brzezinski, Director of Cross Life Counseling. And where we left off last time was I just asked you for some biblical examples, and they all sounded pretty much like warnings, pretty negative, on stuff not to participate in and not to do these sinful activities. So I guess you would say these negatives are God's admonishments to behave dependent on Him. And but are there any positive? Let's go positive. I like that you went negative first, because I know you got some positives in your pocket.
Well, and when God encourages us not to live sinfully, even though it sounds very negative, it is a positive. All we got to do is go back to the Garden of Eden.
Right.
You remember God said to Adam and Eve, "Eat freely of the tree of life."
Yeah.
However, there's a tree standing right by it, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Don't do it. Don't eat of it. Because in the day, if you choose to do so, you're going to die. So it would be a negative to eat it, but it was really a loving, positive admonition not to.
Well, anyone who's a parent
Right.
can easily understand this. Our kids look at us like we have three eyeballs when we tell them they can't do something, even though we know it's in their best interest.
Exactly.
And we know we're saving them from a lot of trouble, pain, heartache, or whatever when we tell them that they cannot go there, cannot do that. So we all basically understand that, I think.
Yes. And so, yes, there are what we would consider to be more positive admonitions of as far as the discipline activity of our faith. Certainly, the discipline activity is to resist sinful behavior expression, because that doesn't evidence God's grace working in us. But positively, we're also admonished, for example, in Revelations chapter 14 and verse 4, we are to keep ourselves chaste. In James 1:27, it says, we are to be unstained by the world, cleansing ourselves from all defilement of flesh and spirit, 2 Corinthians 7:1. We are commanded to humble ourselves in the presence of the Lord, James 4:10, and to clothe ourselves with humility, Peter says in 1 Peter 5:5. Christians should choose to stand firm in the Lord, Philippians 4:1. In the faith, we're encouraged to stand in the faith,
Right.
1 Corinthians 16:13. To participate in the will of God. You can't get any more positive than that, Colossians 4:12.
Sure sounds like a lot of stuff we've been talking about. And it's in black and white.
They should talk about disciplined behavior, they should conduct themselves honorably, Hebrews 13:18. Paul said to the Philippians in chapter 1 and verse 27, in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ.
Right.
To do so, they would devote themselves to prayer, 1 Corinthians 7:5. James admonishes us, and we began this whole discussion in James chapter 2, but in chapter 4 and verse 8, James says, draw near to God. And then finally, Hebrews 4:16 says, to the throne of grace. So we have the admonition to discipline ourselves to participate in the throne of grace.
Again, it's kind of a simple thing once you start explaining it and you start kind of getting a grasp of it. Once you get it, it's that's a good thing. So we have positive and negative commands, right? So how do we view these, or how do we do this without going back into the performance mindset?
That's a great question, Derek. Because it's so easy to do so. It's so easy to lose sight and get excited about participating and then kind of run ahead and start trying to do the things that we've once experienced. And so we experienced it yesterday, and so we assume that tomorrow it's going to look the same way and just kind of do what we've done before. And so and as we've already said before, there's hundreds of imperatives in the New Testament which definitely advocate this discipline activity. But it's by God's design that the Christian participate in relationship with the triune God. God is relational, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and as man chooses to abstain from the sinful activity, he does so based on God's presence, based on God's activity, and our choice to believe allows for the grace of God to kind of be unleashed or manifest through us, which is God at work. So living by faith gives expression. And I love to say this because for so many years, I falsely believed that the primary responsibility of getting this or doing this was for me to understand it and for me to somehow implement it. But living by faith gives expression to the functioning activity of God and His good works through my behavior. I love the fact that if I'll simply let the triune God to do what God does, that He will do it through me. through my participation allows for my behavioral expression
Right.
to allow for the visible manifestation of God at work through me. So the Christian has the glorious privilege of experiencing and expressing God's character seen as good works. Now, somebody, your neighbor, might think, oh, Derek, he does a lot of good things. And yes, he does, but it's really the goodness of God at work through Derek.
Right. And oftentimes, I'll have someone say, well, that was really nice of you. And I'm like, that's not how I was really thinking. So that was, that wasn't me. Trust me. That was the Lord. And, we've all had that experience where someone comes and tries to give us some kind of praise for the act. And we know inside it had nothing to do with us. And we've all experienced that.
And I want to temper that. I know exactly what you mean.
Right. But yeah, you have to put it in proper.
But the point is, it was you.
Yeah.
See, that's the mystery of our spiritual union in Christ.
Mm-hmm.
It's him, but it's me, but it's him, but it's we.
Yeah.
And so it's the beautiful union relationship. Although you know the source of that goodness, so you're not trying to take credit for it. You're boasting in the Lord and you're giving credit where credit is due. But at the same time, you can embrace, yeah, it was me. Praise God.
Right. And then before.
How neat is that?
No, that's incredible. And, but I still know there's plenty of times where my mindset is completely opposite to the action that he's initiating in me.
Yes.
I'm participating very reluctantly.
That reluctance you're feeling is your flesh pattern, or that is the world's pull.
Okay.
Don't identify with that as if it's you.
Right.
If it's not characteristic of Jesus Christ, it's not characteristic of you.
Okay.
See,
so the spiritual battle's going on within, really.
In the soul.
And
because God is in the process of renewing the mind and conforming us to the image of himself experientially, that's already been done spiritually, but experientially, there's still a work in progress for sure.
Right.
There are times where we almost feel like, well, that can't really be me because I don't really feel that. Well, you need to begin to believe the truth about who God says you are in spite of what you feel.
That's where that
Discipline.
old flesh planning,
yes,
patterning is really putting you're accessing that, and it's not going in sync.
Satan's trying to rob you of the pleasure of participating relationally with God, to where it is a mutual loving participation and relationship where you're getting joy, where it's a pleasure, where it's real, it's back and forth.
So it's going to happen in the process of participating with the Lord. So it's not like you don't want to beat yourself up over it. It's a normal thing that's going to happen.
Right.
So when you feel conflicted, we'll say, over something, that's because your flesh patterning is jumping in to what the Lord is leading.
Right. As we referenced a little earlier in the show today, the flesh will always set its desires against the spirit. But notice the battle is the Lord's, not yours.
Right.
So that's important to remember. See, there's not something wrong with you, Derek. Because of the finished work of the cross, you have been made right with God. You have been made the righteousness of God. We need to do a whole show on the believer's righteous identity.
Yeah, I think we have talked about it. And again, we're with Don Brzezinski at CrossLife Counseling, cross-life.org. And I think that's about all the time we got. I'm going to have to get off the couch now that we've that I've got my counseling done for the day. And so next time when we come back, we're going to ask the question. We're going to pick up right at where we left off with this performance mindset, and where we're going to go from there. That we don't want to fall back into it. So we'll see you next time.